I present to you Southwest Baptist University. So they have, you can see the secret question in front of them, and you guys, your time starts now. Yep, move over to our camera there. There you go, center up, there you go.
Would it also be possible for us to time ourselves to make sure we're on track?
Absolutely, yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
feel free.
No Southwest, right?
Yes, sir. Are judges ready?
Yes.
At our school, SBU, it's a running joke that everyone's favorite part of the school is the community. In any conversation or any interview about SBU, it always gets brought up at least once. Because we value communities, both foreign and domestic, we stand opposed to the idea that developed nations should allow high net worth individuals to cut the line and essentially purchase citizenship through citizenship by investment programs. This practice harms both the community that the individual came from and the community that they're coming to in various ways. We'll present our case from a philosophical angle, an economic angle, and finally a political angle to show the downsides of this policy.
To begin with the philosophical angle, I want to ask you guys, what is culture? Because I think ultimately the question of this, whether or not we should allow these high net worth individuals into a country, into a Western country, should revolve around the question of how it affects the culture. And I think when most people hear that word, they immediately begin to think about the national level, the macro scale. And I think that's where they make a mistake. And for that, I would cite Patrick Deneen's book called Why Liberalism Failed. And in it, he introduces this idea that culture isn't actually developed on the national level. Rather, it's always been developed at the local, at the community level. And instead, we need to start thinking about culture as equating to community, the kind of people that you see each and every single day, people that you pass by when you're going to work, people that teach your children, people that you buy bread from at the bakery, right? And so, also to go along with this, we need to begin looking at critiques for the different other philosophies which exist out there. One of them includes the Marxist argument. Why can't we just look at things from the collective level, right? Or we should just look at the thing which benefits the most amount of people, utilitarianism, right? I would say that's wrong because it does not take into account the fact that we're individuals, you and I. So each of us has our own life experiences, our own beliefs, and our own ideologies which have informed our life choices and which have directed us the way that we have gone. The issue with Marxism and the Marxist lens is that it takes that all into account and puts all of society into a mindless, singular, basically blob that really can't be accounted for when you're thinking about what a nation looks like and the impact that that has. And also, if we take things too small, we look at things on the individual level, like John Stuart Mill, the idea of libertarian individualism, we miss out on the fact that no community or no person can live in a vacuum, right? You are raised in a community with a family that teaches you in the way that you're supposed to behave, with a school that gives you education on how to function in society, and then friends which teach you about friendship and the idea that being a sociable person is very important and it's how you survive in society, right? This is an idea that proves that the lens that we're looking at here, how this issue affects communities is the most important issue here. And then we have to, again, look at the communitarian level in the sense that we look at Plato's Republic. He talks about this idea of disorder within the soul preceding disorder in the polity, right? So if we have disharmonious souls, how could we ever seek to have a polity of individuals, associations of people, which can ever come to a conclusion on anything? This is exactly what happens when we bring in these high net worth individuals into communities away from their own community and into ones that they are not acquainted with and ones which they can't contribute towards. And so it's this idea that you should be able to look at the person next to you, the person that you work with at work, the baker across the street, or the person that teaches your children. And you should be able to ask yourself the question, does this issue affect them? Will this result in them having a harder standard of living? Will it affect the way that I can perceive them and continue to build up the situation and community which I have built up, which is what makes the United States and other countries so great. The way that we communicate as people, face to face with each other in the context of that word community.
Secondly, we want to look at the economics behind everything. And when we're doing this, we're going to look at three main things. First, we're going to see how businesses will tend to move or the priorities themselves will shift when these high-income individuals buy their citizenship in another country. And that is because they can't be in two places at once. And this is a thing across the board. People might argue that there are managers or other people who can take on that responsibility, but it is actually that person who has started the business who's going to be able to increase innovation and cause the communities they live in to be better. And what we'll see in these situations is that they're moving towards what? Developed countries that are already at that point. We tend to think first world countries, the United States being the central idea. And with that, we are going to see a lot of these third or second world countries in more, I would say, worse positions. What I mean by that specifically is, like Nick was saying, we aren't looking specifically at the state or national level, but how are these people that are living right now being affected? We look at Bill Gates, who has gone and tried to develop toilets. For example, I watched a whole documentary on it just last week, and the idea there was that he's trying to help these communities, these people who can look at each other face to face. And with that, we're going to see this innovation be tied to other countries. We're going to see an idea where the person itself is split, now not just between two different ideas, but two different civilizations as a whole. And so when we look at it in an economic worldview, we're going to see the innovation in these countries that they're leaving be dramatically affected in a negative way. And that's not going to help the community, that's going to harm the community. We are going to see this furthered when we look at the policies behind everything.
Now lastly, we need to look at the politics behind this issue. By having these communities invest within the United States instead of within their home countries, this is essentially taking away valuable capital that those home countries really need. These hurt the communities, whether that be the mom and pop stores, whether those be the movie theaters. Secondly, this would ultimately lead to my one key point: greater domestic internal political stability. Now this is important for several reasons, but I want to focus on two. First, let's focus on brain drain. What is brain drain? Brain drain is the leaving of educated workers from those developing countries into a country that is more developed, into a country that is seen as more stable, if you will. This has been referenced in several times in history. For example, during the transition of the Weimar Republic into the Third Reich, notable academics ended up leaving the country, such as Niels Bohr, Albert Einstein, and Sigmund Freud. These three individuals ended up working on the atomic bomb for the Americans, which is ultimately what won the victory in Japan in World War II. While I'm not saying that this is applicable in every single instance, there is no doubt that brain drain played a valuable role within this ideal. Secondly, we really need to look at having greater independence for each country. Let's look at an international agreement like the Paris Climate Accords. For example, developed countries have to have a sort of buy-in system for them to get in, whether that be being around $200 million. These monies end up going to these more developing countries like Somalia and the Maldives. These countries have the potential to misuse these funds, ultimately leading to certain reforms not being enacted. By having these investors and these high wealth individuals invest within their own countries, this will lead to greater capital accumulation for those smaller and developing countries, leading them to be to their developed status, and ultimately helping the world as a whole.
As we have seen today throughout this policy case, a house divided against itself cannot stand. You cannot serve both the community that you are going to and the community that you came from. And the problem with that is that is exactly what these CBI policies would be creating, is individuals divided between not only their two different nations with different ideals, but the community that they came from, which they are leaving behind in order to go to another community. And you might say, well, that would help the first community. But no, in fact, you're harming that community by bringing in someone who already has a much higher, high capital, as we've established by the actual words in the policy, is that these are high net worth individuals. Think about the example we've been using, the baker who lives across the street, who works tirelessly every day to make sure that his wares are sold and that everything gets done. But then immediately you come in, a big factory comes in because a high net worth individual has just immigrated to the country. And not only is he leaving the people behind in his own home country to starve, but now he's putting one of your neighbors, one of your friends who you've known for your whole life, out of business. As we have shown from the philosophical angle that communitarianism is the best way, from the economic angle that he's harming both communities, and from the political angle that in history, this just hasn't worked out. We still stand opposed to the idea that high net worth individuals should be able to come in through citizenship by investment. Thank you.
I can ask first. So, take your point about the brain drain or the cost that it would bear on the country they're leaving, but should that be the United States' concern, the brain drain of the other countries?
We're not, so it's not necessarily the United States' concern in a policy level, right? We're going to say, yes, come, bring your wealth, bring your resources to the United States. But the question that is being asked is how does it affect what is it looking like not only for the developed, but indirectly what's it looking like for the undeveloped or the developing. And so what we are arguing is that it's actually harming those communities themselves that they are leaving from. The United States will benefit. We aren't going to oppose that at all. The United States, any first world country, good on them, bring your money, we want that. But that's not the point. The point is we are harming the community that they're going from.
And like the underlying point of everything is that a polity or an association, a community is built with organic institutions, things that were grown by people figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So when you have a billionaire come from another country, not only does it drain capital resources from that country, you also transplant in an environment where it was never meant to be. It's an inorganic substance that then the community has to literally mutate in order to basically properly facilitate, which everyone can agree is harmful to local communities, which then affects the people that you see on the individual level. So from both angles, it's an inorganic displacement of capital, of wealth, putting it somewhere where it doesn't belong, forcing mutations on both ends, whereas a more desirable result would be people growing up within a community setting, naturally contributing in a way that fits with the fabric of everything else, right?
Follow up, but so is your argument then against the CBI in particular or against immigration more generally?
The CBI in particular, because I think what we are establishing is, think about what the wording used in the actual language is the idea of cutting the line. There is a level of, yes, immigration can be a good thing and it can be a positive thing. And that, yes, there's a level of it, but at the same time, it's the high net worths who come in with this level of entitlement that they have the right to just because of their net worth. And it's the wallet over the character of the person is what's being regarded.
And then also we see specifically within that the wealth itself is being displaced, like Nick was saying, and going to another country. So the idea of like two houses divided against itself, that still stands because they are leaving something that is benefiting a community. Someone who is migrating, they don't have a lot to give to that community. It doesn't affect as much as someone who has a lot of power and economy within that community itself. And we're saying that is going to negatively impact more people specifically.
And not only that, I would say community itself actually forces itself to, in a way, when we're talking small scale changes, actually adapt itself. So think about when an immigrant comes to your town and they set up a restaurant or whatever it is, they set up a small business. They actually have to learn to be involved in the community because they're gonna have to buy food from the grocery store from someone else, a member of the community that's been established. They're gonna have to send their student to get taught in the school district where teachers have presumably been there for a long time. There's a lot of give and take which comes with living in a local community, and especially when we're talking about people that can come and don't have so much overwhelming influence and economic capital and resources to bring to bear, they actually have to compromise, right? But when you bring someone in that has a lot of capital, they can circumnavigate basically the elements of compromise, which are what make the organic constructions of community so beautiful, and basically wreck the system and build it to the way that they want it to be, again, mutating it, because they don't have to be part of that give and take situation.
Alright, that's probably a good spot to wrap. I'm gonna go get the other team. Thank you guys.
Thank
What did you have, Alex?
We have 1 minute.
Did you have a follow-up? Go for it. I'm gonna take
I know.
it.
Does anybody have a quick follow-up?
You want to?
Well, I did have a quick one. How would you describe your position philosophically? Because listening to it, and you mentioned communitarianism, Patrick Denis.
Yeah.
Would you describe this as a post-liberal critique?
Yes, in more than one sense, yes.
Okay. That was it.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
I didn't want to use that word because I didn't want to get us in a whole